She was 25, unmarried, and out of the glove trade by noon on a wet October day. Two cutters laughed as she went down the stairs. She had no husband, no reference, no savings worth counting, and no one in the trade who would say she knew leather. What she had was her father's boxwood measuring rule, worn pale at one edge, 11 years in his hand before he died. With £9, she leased the old glove rooms in Bell Yard, empty 2 years, and bought a bundle of scarred skins a larger firm had thrown out. But what Edmund Sloane did not know was that on the long table under the north window at Bell Yard, there was something in those discarded skins nobody at his firm had troubled to look for, and it would not only change what Hannah Price was worth, it would change what half of Worcester wore on its hands that winter. Tell me below if your work was ever counted as someone else's. The cart came into the yard behind Sloane and Rudge a little after 11 on the 9th of October, and the sorting room half emptied to watch it loaded. 42 skins were leaving the building that morning, dressed leather that had been bought as first grade and had arrived as something well below it, and Edmund Sloane had sold the whole lot to a rough dealer in the Tannery Lane at 3p a skin. Josiah Frame, the carter, was 60 years old and had made that run for 11 years, and he stood with his hands pushed into his coat while the boys carried the bundles down the outside steps. Hannah Price stayed at the inspection bench under the window with a half-sewn glove in front of her. She waited until the second bundle came past her shoulder, and then she reached out and took one skin off the top of it. The scar ran nearly the whole length of one edge, a healed tear the width of 2 fingers, dark against the pale dressed surface. Anyone in that room could see it from the door. Hannah took the skin by its 2 ends and pulled it slowly across the width, then turned it and pulled the other way, and then pressed her thumb into it in 4 places, and watched what the leather did when she took her thumb away. Dressed glove leather is not like cloth. It has a direction in it. It has to give across the hand, so a glove will pull on over the knuckles and close again after, and it has to stay firm the long way so the finger does not stretch out into a bag after a month of wear. A cutter who does not know which way a particular skin wants to move can ruin a good one before the shears ever touch it. Her father used to say that most bad gloves were spoiled standing still, before a single cut was made. The scar was in the leather. The scar was not the leather. She laid the skin flat on the corner of the bench and took a card pattern out of the drawer, the main body piece that the trade calls a trank, cut in one flat shape. So the palm and the back of the hand come out of the same stretch. She set it down inside the clean field below the scar. Then she set a second one beside it, turned the other way, and then the small thumb pieces and the narrow strips that fill the sides of the fingers, and she moved none of them onto the damaged edge. 2 pairs out of it, she said. 2 pairs and a spare thumb. And the bad part goes in the basket. Edmund Sloane had come in behind her. He was 46, a heavy, careful man who wore a good coat in the works and never took it off, and he looked at the bench for about as long as it takes to read a price on a ticket. "You are a sewer, Miss Price," he said. "You are a very good sewer, and you check seams for me, and I pay you for it." That skin was condemned by a cutter. "I know what it was condemned by," she said. "Have him stretch it in front of you. It goes on the cart." It went on the cart. Josiah Frame took the load away down Sidbury at 11:30. 42 skins for 10 shillings and 6p, and Hannah went back to the inspection bench and finished the pair in front of her, and did not speak to anybody until the dinner bell. Hannah Price had learned leather the way other children learn hymns, standing at her father's elbow before she was tall enough to see across the cutting table. Thomas Price had been a cutter for 30 years, first in a shop in the blockhouse, and then at a firm in Sidbury that closed under him in 1860. He was a small, slow-spoken man with a cough he blamed on the river. He kept his patterns in an oilcloth roll, and he cut left-handed, and he had taught 2 apprentices in his life, neither of whom stayed in the trade. On Sundays after chapel, he would put a skin on the kitchen table and make Hannah tell him what was in it before she was allowed her tea. She was 11 when she got her first one right, and 14 before she got them right regularly. The trade in Worcester had been a great thing once, There had been more glove houses in the city than anybody could count on both hands, and the roads out to the villages had been full of women carrying homework in cloth bundles. Then the protection against foreign gloves was taken away, and the French goods came in cheaper and lighter and better finished, and the houses started going one after another. By the time Hannah was grown, the trade was still there, but it had become a thin, nervous business that watched every farthing and every rival. And Edmund Sloane ran his firm the way a man runs down a hill. Fast, because slowing was worse. Her father died in the February of '63. 9 days before he died, when he already knew he would not go back to a bench, he sent her upstairs for the oilcloth roll and gave her his boxwood measuring rule, 16 inches, worn pale along one edge from his thumb. "Never judge a skin till you have made it move," he said. That was the whole of it. He did not tell her to be brave, and he did not tell her she would be somebody. And he was asleep again before the kettle boiled. She went into Sloane and Rudge at 19. She sewed for 2 years. And then Sloane found out that she could sort faster and more accurately than the man doing it, and moved her to the intake bench, and then to inspection, and after that to sorting the cut work into matched bundles for the outdoor sewers. She did 4 jobs in the building and was paid 9 shillings a week for one of them. Twice she asked to be tried at the cutting table. The first time Sloane said the men would not stand for it. The second time, he did not answer at all. On the 16th of October, he called the sewing floor together and said what everybody already knew, which was that Birmingham and the French were taking the middle of the market, and the house had to come down to its bones for the winter. He let 8 women go that morning. Martha Vine, 38, who had been there 9 years and had a husband out of work with a bad leg. A girl of 17 whose name Hannah never learned properly, and Hannah last, because he did it in order of the bench. She asked him, in front of 6 people, to keep her on at the cutting table instead of the inspection bench, at a cutter's rate or under it. "You have a very good eye for a woman," Edmund Sloane said. "Go and sew." 2 of the cutters laughed. She heard it on the stairs, and she did not turn round. And by noon, she was out on Sidbury in a wet wind, with her wages in her hand and her father's rule in her pocket, where it had been every working day for 4 years. She had £9 and 4 shillings in a tin behind the flour crock, which was 11 years of sixpences, and she sat up that night and did the only sum that mattered. Rent somewhere would be about 12 or 14 shillings a month. Leather would be whatever leather cost. Sewing would have to be paid by the pair, in cash, on the day, because no woman who took work home could wait a month for money, and neither could Hannah. She had a fortnight of eating in that tin and a business behind it, or nothing. Bell Yard was a narrow brick passage off Sidbury with a cooper at the mouth of it, and a tallow smell that came and went with the wind. Halfway down stood a 2-story workshop of red brick gone black at the joints, slate roof, tall windows in the upper room, with more than half the panes still whole. The last master there had been a man named William Chake, who had cut gloves in that room for 19 years, and had gone under in '65, owing money to 3 people, one of whom was his own sister. The owner was Agnes Bell, 58, widow of the man who had built the place up, and she met Hannah at the door with the key in her apron, and a face that had heard a good many proposals. "You have no firm behind you," Agnes said. "No." Check had a firm behind him, and it did not save him. "I want it by the month," Hannah said. "I will pay on the day. I will mend the roof and the windows at my own cost, and if I go, the mending stays." Agnes Bell looked at her for a while and then named 14 shillings a month, first month down, and said that if the money was ever a day late, she would have the key back and no argument. They did it standing up in the passage. There was no paper and no witness. And Hannah paid the first month out of the tin on the 21st of October. If you have ever looked at a thing that everybody else had finished with and known, without being able to prove it, that they were wrong, tell me in the comments what it was. because 2 days later Hannah Price walked to a dresser's yard off the Butts with 15 shillings in her hand, and the man there thought she was buying for somebody else. Isaac Webb was 52. A leather dresser and broker with a narrow yard, a good name, and a set of accounts that depended on 3 large customers. He sold small lots for cash to anybody. He had a heap of seconds in the corner under a sheet, skins with brands, scratches, scars, thin flanks, and color that had gone patchy in the dressing. 30 of them, Hannah said. I will pick the 30. 6 pence each and you pick your own? I will pay 7 pence and pick my own. She went through the heap on her knees for an hour and a quarter. She pulled every skin twice, once across and once along, and she pressed her thumb into the flanks where the leather is always thinnest, and she put back more than she took. Webb watched her do it and said nothing until she stood up. Cheek used to do that, he said. I know he did. She carried them home over her shoulder. 17 shillings and 6 pence gone. And that was the beginning of it. Nell Carter came up Bell Yard on the Thursday with her sleeves already rolled. She was 43. A home sewer of 26 years, standing, widowed, with a son at the vinegar works, and a way of saying things that closed the subject. She had sewn thousands of pairs for Sloane and Rudge at 3 pence halfpenny, and had been kept waiting for the money twice. You will not pay me for a fortnight, Nell said, at the foot of the stairs. I will pay you the day the first order is paid. And I will pay 4 pence a pair after that. 4 pence, 4 pence. And I do not ask you to sew anything I would not stand behind. The upper room had been shut for 2 years, and it smelled of cold soot and mouse. 9 panes were cracked or gone, and the rain had come in over the north corner and rotted a yard of the plaster. There were 2 long cutting tables, both scarred to a shine by 40 years of shears, and one of them rocked. There were drawers of card patterns that mice had been at, and a plain iron stove with the pipe rusted through at the elbow. They worked at it for 5 days. A slater named Ned Sorrell, 34, came for 2 days at 3 shillings a day and put back 11 slates and a length of flashing over the north corner. The 9 panes went back in at 7 pence each, 5 shillings, and 3 pence for the lot. Hannah wedged the table leg with a strip of oak and then packed it again with a folded playing card, which is a repair that anybody who has worked at a bad table knows. She scrubbed the lower shelves with lime and water and left the window open for 2 days to get the damp smell out of them. And she took the shears to a cutler on the Shambles, who ground and set both pairs for 4 pence. Then she made the shelves mean something, which was the part nobody else would have bothered with. The bottom shelf, ungraded, skins as bought. The second shelf, passed. The third shelf, cut work in bundles. And on the floor by the stair, 2 sacks. One for scrap, and one for the pieces that had a fault in them. And nothing that went into either sack ever came back out. The card patterns took another day. She sorted them by size. 6s, 6 1/2s, 7s, 7 1/2s, and found she had a good run in the smaller sizes and almost nothing above a 7 1/2, which she decided she could live with. On the 29th of October, she cut her first skins in her own room. She started with the worst-looking one she had. A skin with a brand across the shoulder and a rough patch on one flank. She worked it in her hands for 2 or 3 minutes before she put it down, and it came back at her firm and even everywhere except the brand and the last 4 inches of the flank. She chalked round both, laid 2 tranks and their thumbs in the field between, cut them, and put the branded piece in the sack. Then she took a skin that had looked better than any other in the lot, pale and smooth, with nothing on the surface at all but a little color patchiness at one end. It went soft under her hands. It kept stretching and did not come back, the way leather does when the dressing has gone too far or the beast was in poor condition, and when she pulled it firmly between her fists, a small split ran out of nowhere near the middle of the back. She sat down with it on her knees for a minute. The ugly skin had given her 2 good pairs. The pretty one was worth nothing at all, and she had bought it because it looked well in a heap. By the 2nd of November, there were 6 pairs finished on the table. Nell had sewn them in her own kitchen, 4 of them in one day, and they had a tight, even seam that a Birmingham draper would recognize. 2 other pairs had been cut, sewn, inspected, and scrapped. One for a thumb that pulled crooked, and one because Hannah had let a small blemish get through into the back of the hand where the light would catch it. Those went into the fault sack with everything else. She wrapped the 6 pairs in clean paper and tied them with twine, and on the 4th she took the train from Shrub Hill to Birmingham, 3rd class, 2 shillings and 4pence there and back, which was more than a day of a sewer's wages. Samuel Henshaw was 40, a draper with 2 shops and a small wholesale trade to smaller shops, and he did not want to talk about how the gloves came to be made. He took the first pair out of the paper and pulled the right one onto his own hand without asking, which is what a buyer does, and worked his fingers, and pulled it off, and turned it inside out, and ran his thumb along the seam. Then he did something Hannah had hoped he would do. He laid the 2 gloves of the pair side by side on the counter and looked at them together, at the color and at the way the back sat, because a pair that does not match is a pair that stays in the shop. He went through all 6. He did not smile at any of them. Who dresses your leather? Webb, off the butts. And 1 or 2 others. Price? 2 shillings and 3pence. 2 shillings and a penny, Henshaw said, for 24 pairs, sizes 6 to 7. In my hands, by the 23rd of November. If they are late, I do not take them. And if the 24 are not as good as these 6, I do not take them either. I buy from Sloane and Rudge as well, Miss Price, so I know what a Worcester glove costs me. 24 pairs at 2 shillings, and a penny was 2 pounds and 2 shillings. She said yes on the spot. She had 11 skins left out of the 30 when she got back from Birmingham, and 24 pairs to make in 19 days. Webb had a job lot in from a dealer at Droitwich, 80 skins at 4pence halfpenny, sold as they stood, no picking. 30 shillings for the lot. Hannah stood in the yard with the sheet turned back and looked at the top of the heap, which was ordinary enough, scars and brands and a few bad edges, nothing she had not already cut around twice that fortnight. You will not go through them? Webb said. At 4pence halfpenny, I do not need to be right about all of them. That sentence cost her the best part of a month. She got them up to Bellyard in 2 loads and started at the top of the pile on the Wednesday morning, and by the middle of the afternoon, she had stopped keeping count of the ones she was putting on the floor. The Droitwich lot had been dressed hard and fast. Skin after skin came up soft in the hand and stayed soft, stretching on and on without coming back, and 3 of them opened along a hidden line when she worked them properly. One was so far gone in the flanks that there was nothing in it but the spine, and a glove is not made out of a spine. She worked through the whole 80 in 2 days, because she had to know. 51 of them went into the scrap sack, whole or nearly whole. Of the 29 that were sound, most had their good field in the middle and small, which meant 6s and 6 1/2s, and Henshaw wanted sizes 6 to 7 with the 7s, the ones his shops sold. She counted the cut work on the Friday night. 14 pairs worth in the sizes he had asked for, and 9 days left. She had spent 30 shillings on a heap that had given her about 10 shillings of leather, and she had spent it because she had learned one true thing in October and turned it into a false one. Some rejected skins have good glove leather in them. She had let that become most of them. And the difference between those 2 sentences was standing on her floor in a sack. She worked that night until the lamp began to smoke, and it was that night she made the worst mistake. There were 4 skins left from the sound 29, and she wanted them cut before morning. She had handled them all on Wednesday. She did not handle them again. She laid them out under the lamp and set her patterns the way the marks were freshest in her memory, and on 2 of the skins she put the tranks down with the give running the long way instead of across, which is the one thing her father had drummed into her before she was 12. She cut 6 tranks that way. In lamplight, on the table, they looked like 6 tranks. Nell sewed 4 of them into 2 pairs on the Saturday, and brought them up on the Monday and put them on the table without a word. And Hannah pulled one on and knew before her thumb was through. The glove went on stiff across the knuckles and then went slack down the finger. And after 3 or 4 pulls, the shape of it was gone. "That is not the leather," Nell said. "No, that is me." "Then say so out loud and put them in the sack, because I am not sewing the other 2. 6 tranks, 2 pairs of sewing, and the last 4 decent skins she had." They went into the fault sack together, and Hannah stood and looked at the sack for a while. And then she wrote on the back of the receipt for the Droitwich lot, in pencil, "Cut nothing after 9 at night." That left her with 14 pairs, 9 days, and £3 and 1 shilling in the tin. Nell came up on the Tuesday morning and put it plainly, standing at the end of the table with her bonnet still on. "You have 2 roads. You send Henshaw 14 pairs and a letter explaining yourself, and he never writes to you again, and quite right. Or you go and buy leather like everybody else buys leather, and you take the loss and you make the 24. If I buy first grade at the price first grade costs, there is no profit in the order at all." "There is no profit in a 14-pair order either," Nell said, "and there is no order after it." Hannah went out to a dresser named Corbett on the far side of the city, a man she did not know, and bought 12 clean first-grade skins at 1 shilling and 8 pence each, £1 exactly. She handled every one of them in his yard for a good half-hour before she paid, which she noticed herself doing and did not stop. Those 12 skins gave her the 10 pairs she needed and 2 spare, in the sizes Henshaw had asked for, without a single anxious placement. That was its own lesson, and she took it. The 24 pairs went off from Shrub Hill on the 22nd of November, wrapped in paper, tied in 2 parcels, and Henshaw's money came back by the end of the week, £2 and 2 shillings, which she wrote in the book against 30 shillings for the Droitwich lot. £1 for Corbett's 12, 8 shillings to Nell for the sewing, 4 shillings and 8 pence in fares, and a shilling for paper and twine. It came out at a loss of 2 shillings and 8 pence in 5 weeks of her life. Henshaw's letter came in the same post as the money. The gloves were good, the sizing was accurate, and if she could do 72 pairs by the 20th of December, he would take them at 2 shillings and 2 pence. Nell read the letter twice. "He has put the price up a penny," she said. "He has put it up a penny because he does not want to lose me before Christmas. And he has trebled the order because he wants to see whether I fall over." She sat in the cold upper room that Saturday with the yield book open, which was a penny notebook she had ruled into 6 columns with the boxwood rule, and she worked out what had actually happened rather than what she had felt happening. The first 30 skins, picked by hand, one at a time, on her knees in Webb's yard. 23 sound, 38 pairs, 7 pence a skin. That worked out at about 4 pence halfpenny of leather in every finished pair. The Droitwich 80, bought by the heap, 29 sound. And by the time she had allowed for the sizes and the scrap, something near 10 pence in every pair. The 12 clean skins from Corbett, 12 sound, 22 pairs, and 11 pence in every pair. So the cheap leather had cost her more than the dear leather. Not because seconds were bad, because she had bought them without her hands on them, and the whole value of what she could do lay in her hands being on them. She wrote 4 lines at the top of the second page and kept to them for the rest of her working life. Handle every skin before the money leaves the tin. Refuse anything that goes on stretching and does not come back, however cheap it is. Price the lot by the pairs it will actually give, not by the count of skins. And carry enough clean first-grade stock to finish an order when a lot disappoints, because a date missed is worth more than a shilling saved. She took the 4th rule from a hard fortnight, and the 2nd one from a man who had been dead 5 years. She went back to Webb on the Monday with £3 in her pocket and told him she would buy nothing at all unless she could handle it first, at whatever price that took. Webb turned back the sheet and let her at the heap, and she spent 2 hours and rejected 41 skins out of the 63 he had. and bought 22 of them at 7 pence, and left the 41 on his floor. "You are hard on my stock," Webb said. "I am hard on my own money." She taught Nell the intake in an afternoon, because doing it alone was going to kill the business faster than Sloane would. Sound and clean, which went straight to the past shelf. Sound with a fault in one place, which went to the past shelf with the fault chalked round it. And soft, or thin in the flanks, or splitting, which went into the scrap sack in front of the cellar, if the cellar was there to see it. Nell learned it in a day and a half, and was better at the third category than Hannah was, because Nell had never wanted to save anything in her life. December made the little building into a workshop. Nell brought in 4 sewers in 9 days. All of them women she had sat beside at one time or another. And all of them told the terms at the door, because Nell would not have anybody in on a misunderstanding. Sarah Doggett was 48 and the fastest of them and could not read. Mary Ann Kell, 36, sewed at her kitchen table with her mother in the same room. Eliza Bunn was 29 and had 4 children and could only take small bundles, and she took them and brought them back on the day. Every time, which is worth more than speed. The 4th was let go after a fortnight because her seams wandered on the thumb, and Nell did that herself, on the doorstep, in about 40 seconds. Martha Vine came up from her own house on the 8th of December and asked if there was anything at all. Hannah put her on the lower room at 8 shillings a week, sorting cut work into pairs, matching by color and by the way the leather sat, and wrapping the finished goods. Martha had done that for 9 years for Sloane, and had never once been thanked for it. Alice Reed was 17, and came because her aunt knew Sarah Doggett. She was a careful sewer and a silent one, and for the first 3 weeks she gave the impression of expecting to be sent home at any moment for a reason nobody would explain to her. The work found its own order, and then Hannah wrote the order down so it would survive a bad week. Skins came in on a Tuesday, and were handled and graded the same day, and anything that failed went into the sack before dark. Wednesday and Thursday were cutting, at the north table, standing, in the best light of the day, and never after 9 at night. Friday the bundles went out, each one a matched pair of tranks with its thumbs and the narrow strips for the fingers, tied with a thread and marked with the size. Monday and Thursday the sewn work came back, and every pair was pulled onto a hand, turned inside out, looked at along the seam, and looked at flat beside its partner. And what failed went into the fault sack. The sacks went out once a fortnight to a size boiler at Diglis, who paid a shilling a hundredweight for scrap leather, which came to almost nothing, and was never the point. The point was that the bad leather left the building and could be seen leaving. Of the first 30 pairs sewn for Henshaw's second order, 3 were rejected. 1 thumb crooked, 1 seam pulled at the fork, 1 back of a hand where a soft patch had got past Hannah at the cutting table and only showed itself when the glove was stretched over a fist. She wrote all 3 in the book under the heading of her own faults, because there was no other honest place to put the 3rd one. On the 11th of December, Edmund Sloane came down Bell Yard. He came at 3 in the afternoon, when Webb's boy was unloading 20 skins at the door. And he stood at the mouth of the passage in his good coat and watched the leather go in. Hannah came out with her apron on and her hands full of chalk. "You are cutting, then?" Sloane said. "I am." He looked up at the windows, at the new panes, which were cleaner than the old ones, and showed as 4 bright squares in the row. "It is a tidy little shop." He said it without any edge at all, which was worse. "I would only say this to you, Miss Price, as somebody who has watched 30 years of it. Small men in this trade do not fail because their work is poor. They fail because they take an order they cannot fill and lose the customer for good. Be careful what you promise before Christmas." Then he went back up Sidbury, and Hannah stood in the passage for a moment and then went in and cut for 4 hours. She understood him perfectly well by then. He was not a fool, and he was not a monster. He had 110 people depending on his throughput, French gloves coming in under him, and a partner of 71 named Rudge, who had not been into the works in 2 years and drew his share regardless. A man in that position wants uniform leather, one grade, cut fast, sewn fast, out of the door. What she was doing, one skin at a time, with a woman on her knees in a yard rejecting 2 out of 3, was not a thing his firm could do. It was only a thing her firm could do. He had left her alone while she was a curiosity. Henshaw's second order took her out of that. Isaac Webb sent word on the 16th that she should come down. And when she came, he did not take her into the yard. He stood in the doorway of his office with his hands behind him. "I cannot go on selling to you," he said. She waited. "There is no trick in it. And I will not pretend there is. I buy through a factor at Birmingham, and I have 3 accounts that keep this yard open. And one of the 3 had a conversation about me in a room I was not in. Nobody said your name to me. Nobody had to." He looked at the floor, and then he looked at her. "I have a wife, and a yard, and 11 years to go on a lease. How long have I got? You have what is under the sheet today, and nothing after it." She bought what was under the sheet, 31 skins, of which she took 19 at 7 pence. And she did not argue with him, and she did not ask him to be braver than he was. On the way home, she worked out that she had 3 weeks of leather and 11 days of order. She could have gone to Sloane. She thought about it on the bridge and got as far as composing the first sentence, and then she thought about what the second sentence would have to be, and she went home instead and opened the yield book at the back and wrote out every name she could think of who dressed or sold glove leather within reach of a railway line. There were 11 names. She wrote to 7 of them that night and walked the other 4. 2 never answered. One wrote back to say he sold only in lots of 200. One was dead. A dresser at Upton-upon-Severn, a slow, suspicious man named Peter Loach, 44, let her come out on the train and handle his seconds on the floor of his shed and sold her 35 skins at 5 pence halfpenny because she took the ones nobody else would look at and paid him cash in his hand. A broker in Birmingham with a warehouse 10 minutes from Henshaw's shop turned out to have a standing heap of imperfect skins that came in with better lots and sat there being a nuisance to him, and he was glad of a woman who would come up on the train once a fortnight, sort them on his own floor, and take the awkward ones away. That last arrangement was worth more than Webb had ever been, and it existed only because Sloane had made it necessary. She changed the buying to match. No lot over £2. Cash. Always. And never a promise to take anything unseen. 1 skin in 3 by money, to be clean first grade. Bought at full price and kept on the top shelf for the end of an order, which was the rule she had bought with a 2 shilling and 8 pence loss in November. She raised nothing with Henshaw and told him nothing about any of it. On the 15th of December there were 61 pairs finished, wrapped, and standing on the shelf, with the last 11 cut and out with Sarah Doggett and Mary Ann Kell. Samuel Henshaw's letter came on the 17th, and it was 4 sentences long. He had intended, he wrote, to talk to her before Christmas about a winter quantity for January delivery, in the region of 240 pairs. He had since been told, by a Worcester manufacturer of long standing, whose goods he had bought for 9 years, that Miss Price was buying condemned leather by the sackful and putting it into finished gloves. He was not in a position to know whether that was true. He would therefore come to Bell Yard on the 19th at 11 o'clock, and he would bring the manufacturer with him, because he did not care to hear a thing said about a supplier behind her back that could be said in front of her face. Hannah read it standing up and then read it again sitting down, and the second time she noticed her own hands. "He has not accused me of anything," she said. "He has said what I do and made it sound like a crime, and the terrible part is that it sounds like one." "It does," Nell said. "If a man in Birmingham hears that a woman is buying rejected skins at 4 pence and selling gloves at 2 and 2 pence, what does he think has happened to the bad parts? He thinks they are in the gloves. That was the whole of it. And it was not stupid of Henshaw to wonder. There was nothing in the world easier than to lay a pattern over a thin place and hope. And there were shops in every town selling gloves that had been made exactly that way and went through at the knuckle in a month. Sloane had not needed to lie. He had only needed to describe half of her business and let a careful man finish the sentence himself. She spent an hour that evening thinking about what to put out of sight. The fault sack was the obvious thing. It stood by the stair with its neck open and 20 pounds of chalked, condemned, unusable leather in it, and any man walking into that room would see it in the first 3 seconds. She stood and looked at it and thought about the shed at the back. Then she stopped, because the sack was the argument. She did not stage the room. She had Martha weigh the scrap and the fault sacks and write the weights on a card, since they were going out to Diglis the following week in any case. She set the yield book open on the end of the table at the page where the Droitwich lot was written up in full. 51 skins, refused out of 80. 30 shillings gone, and she did not tidy that page or copy it out fair. She left the ungraded shelf exactly as it was, 20-odd skins, as they had come off the train from Upton, unhandled, ungraded, with the string still on them. The only preparation she made was to tell Nell and Martha and Alice to work as they always worked and not to answer for her. Agnes Bell came down at 10:30 on the 19th in her good bonnet and stood at the back of the lower room with her arms folded. Nobody had asked her. It was her building, and somebody had used a word near it that she did not intend to have said twice. They came up the yard together at 11, Henshaw in a traveling coat with his hat in his hand. Sloane a pace behind him, and it was clear from the doorway that they had not enjoyed the walk from the station. Hannah did not make a speech. She had thought about one for 2 days and had decided against it, on the grounds that a man who buys gloves for a living does not want to be told anything he can find out with his hands. "Mr. Henshaw," she said, "go to that shelf and pick me a skin. Anyone you like. They came in on Saturday, and nobody in this room has touched them." Henshaw looked at the shelf for a moment and then pulled out one of the worst. A skin with a brand burnt across one shoulder, a scored patch the size of a hand along the flank, and a torn edge. "That one. That is a good choice," Hannah said, and took it to the north table. She worked it in front of them for 2 full minutes, and she said what she was doing while she did it, in the plainest words she had. Across first, to find where it gave and how far and whether it came back. Then the long way, to see that it held. Then the flanks, thumb pressed in and lifted, 4 places on each side, because the flanks are where a skin goes thin without showing it. Then the whole of it once more. Harder, because a fault that will open under a man's hand in a shop had better open on her table first. It held everywhere except the flank and the last 3 inches by the tier. "There is an old word in this trade for what I do next," she said. "The cutters called it taxing a skin. It only means working out how many gloves are truly in it once you have allowed for everything that is wrong with it. Most people guess by looking. You cannot." She chalked round the brand, round the scored flank, and round the torn edge, and then she laid the patterns down inside what was left, moving them twice to get the stretch running the right way across the hand, and she cut 2 tranks, their thumbs, the narrow strips for the fingers. Then she took the shears and cut the chalked pieces away from the sheet and carried them across the room and dropped them into the fault sack in front of both men. "That is between 1/3 and 1/2 of what I paid for," she said. "It never comes back out of that sack. It goes to the size boiler at Diglis at 1 shilling the hundredweight, and Martha weighs it. And it is written down." Henshaw put his hand into the sack himself and brought out a piece of the scored flank and pulled it, and it went soft and stayed soft. "You could have got a thumb out of the corner of this." "I could. It would come back to you in February." He put it back in the sack. Then he went to the finished shelf and took the 72 pairs apart parcel by parcel, and he pulled 11 gloves onto his own hand, and he laid 4 pairs out flat side by side and looked along them, and he turned two of them inside out and ran his thumb up the seam at the fork. Nobody spoke. Alice Reed sewed the whole time at the bench in the lower room without once looking up, which Hannah thought about afterwards. Last he read the yield book, standing, for perhaps 6 minutes. And the page he spent the longest on was the Droitwich page. "You lost 30 shillings, he said. "I lost 30 shillings and I wrote it down so that I would not do it again." Henshaw closed the book. "I will take the 72, he said. 240 pairs, sizes 6 to 7.5, in my hands by the 20th of January, at 2 shillings and 4 pence. And I have a man at Coventry, Josiah Mead, who has been asking me where I get a decent middling glove. Send him 6 samples and my name on the paper." Then he turned round, because there was one more piece of business in the room, and he was not going to leave it lying there. "Mr. Sloane, have you anything to add to what you told me on Tuesday?" Sloane had not moved from the top of the stairs. He looked at the fault sack and at the shelf of clean first-grade stock above the cut-work, and at the 72 parcels standing wrapped in their paper, and Hannah watched him do the arithmetic that he was better at than almost anybody in the city, and arrive at the answer, and dislike it. 2 and 4 pence, he said. "You will not hold that price when your leather is honest all through." "I hold it because a third of my leather is honest all through," Hannah said, "and I pay full price for that third, and I do not put my name to the rest of it." He took that. He put his hat on at the door of the lower room, and he said, "Good day, Miss Price," and he went up the yard. And that was the last time Edmund Sloane ever came to Bell Yard. Agnes Bell unfolded her arms and went home without saying anything to anybody. By the end of January, there were 8 women taking work home from Bell Yard and 2 in the building, and the wages went out of the tin on Saturday afternoons in coin, on the day every week, which was the one promise Hannah had made at the beginning, and the only one she had never come close to breaking. The 240 pairs went to Birmingham on the 18th, 2 days early, in 5 parcels. Josiah Mead at Coventry took the 6 samples and wrote back asking about 100 for the spring. And Hannah wrote back and said she could do 60, and would rather do 60 well, which Nell said was the first sensible letter she had ever seen a beginner write. The lower room was warm now because the stovepipe had been mended properly in December by a man who knew how. The upper room was not warm and never would be, and the light in it, on a January morning, came in through the tall north windows, the color of dishwater, which is bad light for reading, and the best light there is for judging leather. Alice Reed had taken to standing at the end of the north table when her own work was ahead of her, watching Hannah's hands and saying nothing. She had done it for 3 weeks. On the last Saturday of the month, Hannah looked up in the middle of working a skin and found her there again with a bundle of thumbs in her arms and an expression on her face like somebody expecting to be sent downstairs. "How old are you, Alice?" 17 in October, miss." "Put those down." Hannah went to the drawer and took out the boxwood rule. 16 inches, worn pale along one edge from a dead man's thumb, and 4 years of her own, and she put it into the girl's hands and pushed the skin across the table. "Never judge a skin till you have made it move," she said. "That is not mine. It was my father's. And it is the only thing in this trade you cannot be taught out of a book. Take it by the 2 ends, across first. Pull it and feel where it wants to go." Alice took the 2 ends of the skin. "Harder than that," Hannah said. "You cannot hurt it. If you can hurt it, it is not going out of this room." Hannah Price had been 25 years old, unmarried, out of a firm that would not put her name to the work she was already doing, with £9 and 4 shillings in a tin behind the flour crock. She had spent nearly the whole of it in 5 weeks on a leaking roof, 9 panes of glass, a month's rent, and a heap of leather that other people had finished with, and she never afterwards wanted a shilling of it back. Downstairs, Martha called up that the Upton skins had come. Nell was counting bundles at the foot of the stairs. Alice pulled the skin across the width, and then again, and looked up to see whether she had it right.